in, especially if you're watching via Facebook Live. We've had a problem. We've been live streaming without any issues on YouTube and then on our website. But the last couple of Sundays, obviously not this past Sunday, we didn't live stream. But the last couple of Sundays, people have told me, hey, I didn't catch you on Facebook Live. And when we investigated it, Facebook had turned us off. And they do this like once or twice a year. And if you got to just kind of be checking it, right? And so we had to go back in and re-register and all of that kind of stuff. Everybody wants their little click, right? And so, but we should be good now. I think we're back good. I think Jeff took care of that. And so we should be live streaming on YouTube, on our website, and Facebook Live. And so if you are joining us on Facebook Live, would you chime in and let us know where you are watching? You don't have to say, I'm watching from my dining room table or kitchen. Just say, hey, Silsbee, USA, or anywhere else that you may be watching around good old America or outside these United States of America. We'd love to get to know you and know where you're joining us. First of all, thank you for joining us. A lot of other places you could have chimed in to join us. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 22. This is really the second half, or the second two-thirds, if you will, of 1 Samuel chapter 22. We began this study back in January. We should finish maybe just after the first of the year as far as 1 Samuel goes. And so then we'll go right into 2 Samuel. And so I kind of fit, right? If you're going to do 1 Samuel, you got to do 2 Samuel as we look at the reign of King David and Solomon, right? So tonight, 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 6 through 23. I'm going to read it to you just here in a moment. But this is really a sad story, to tell you the truth, because there is murder in these verses. There is hostility in these verses. There is continued jealousy. There is manipulation. There's intimidation. There is even the accusations of conspiracy in these chapters. But when you boil it down, and what Saul does and what he demands to be done, I think you can trace it back to really who is Saul really after. I don't know if it's David. Obviously we know in the story that he wants David dead. But why kill these priests? Okay, you could say, well, because he thinks that they helped David. All right, fine. Then why kill the townspeople? Right? I think, in essence, that Saul's really mad at two people. He's mad at God, and I think he's angry with himself. You ever been angry with yourself and done some foolish things? This means yes. This means no, right? Yeah. Have you ever been so frustrated? I know none of you have ever been frustrated. You're not human, right? No, we have all been frustrated and made some very poor decisions. We've been angry. Maybe we thought that we were angry at somebody else. And we thought, you know what, I'm going to get my pound of flesh some way or another. I'm going to get my payback, if you will. But ultimately what ends up happening is, who really suffers in all that? We do. Okay? And I think that's what you're going to see in Saul's attempt, and we might call this, hey, striking at God, okay? He's doing all these things on the human level, but, I think he's really trying to, God, I'll just show you type of thing. But I think about that. When we take on that mindset and that attitude, we are also thinking, all right, I'm going to injure God, maybe not in a literal sense, but in a figurative sense. Who are we really hurting? Again, we're hurting ourselves because, why do I say that? Why do I say that we're hurting ourselves? Think about this. Who created us? Who provides for our every need? Who sustains us? And I could go on and on about all the things that God does for us. And so when we are attempting, and when people attempt today to get at God or to carry out their anger or disappointment at God, not only is it evil, not only is it disappointing, but I would say to you, it's also self-defeating. Because again, who are you really hurting? You're really hurting yourself. In fact, have you ever heard this statement before? You ever heard this little cliche? Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. That's basically what Saul is doing here. Again, I remind you that our first duty is what? What the Bible says is the greatest commandment? How? To love the Lord your God with all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and with all your heart. And the second one is very much like the first, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. So think about this. Our first priority is to love God and to honor Him. God is the one who gives us life. God is the one who gives us breath. God is the one who really provides everything else in our life. And so to strike at God is both evil and foolish, but it's also self-defeating. And that's exactly what Saul does in these verses that we are going to read. So let's look at verses 6 through 23. Let me just read the entire passage. And then the outline is pretty simple tonight, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this up into three sections, these 17, 18 verses. Divide these up in three sections, and I'm going to kind of give you my interpretation of the heading for these verses, okay? So just follow along as I read them, picking up in verse 6. Here's what it says. It says, so when Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered, now Saul was staying in Gibeah, okay? Now Gibeah was kind of his hometown. This was where his palace was, okay? Gibeah under a tamarisk tree in Ramah, which with his spear in his hand and all his servants standing about him. And knowing what he's capable of doing with his spear, I mean, you can look at it one of two ways. You're thinking, man, he knows how to throw it, but he's not very accurate. You know, he's missed David on at least 3 different occasions, right? And Jonathan. That's a good point. We can't forget about Jonathan. So he's got his posse, if you will, around him. He's sitting under this tree, and he's got a spear in his hand. Now watch what he does in verse 7. Then Saul said to his servants who stood about him, "Hear now you what?" Let me invite you to do something. I want you to circle or underscore the word Benjaminites, because Saul was a Benjaminite, and so were his servants. Now, what tribe did David descend from? Judah. Okay? So keep in mind this, the descendants of Benjamin, descendants of Judah, they're all related, right? You trace them all the way back. These are part of the sons of Israel, the sons of Jacob, right? So you got the descendants of the Benjamites, that's who Saul's tribe is, and you've got the descendants of Judah, that's who David's tribe is. And so Saul makes this statement to his entourage. He says, look, hear now you Benjaminites, and I find this interesting. He says, will the son of Jesse, he doesn't call him David, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? All of you have conspired against me. And there is no one who reveals to me and to my son, that my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse. There is not one of you who is sorry for me or reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as it is this day. Then answered Doeg. Y'all remember that cat? And Doeg the Edomite, who was set over the servants of Saul, said, I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob and to Elimelech the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him, that is, the priest inquired of the Lord for David, and gave him provisions and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. So the king sent to call Elimelech, the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king. And Saul said, Hear now, son of Ahitub. He answered, Here am I, my lord. And Saul said to him, Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse? in that you have given him bread and a sword and have inquired of God for him that he should rise against me to lie in wait as it is to this day. So Elimelech answered the king and said, and who among all your servants is as faithful as David? Who is the king's son-in-law, who goes at your bidding and is honorable in your house? Did I begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to any in the house of my father. For your servant knew nothing of all this, little or much. And we know this to be true because he asked David, hey, why are you here, right? And David lied to him. David purposefully lied to him to protect him and to not get him involved, right? So, verse 16. And the king said, you shall surely die, and you and your father and all your father's house. Then the king said to the guards who stood about him, turn and kill the priest of the Lord, because their hand also is with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not tell it to me. But watch what happens. But the servants of the king, now watch this, would not lift their hands to strike the priest of the Lord. And the king said to Doeg, you turn and kill the priest. So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck the priest and killed on that day, watch this, 85 men who wore a linen ephod. Also Nob, the city of the priest, he struck with the edge of the sword, both men and women, children, nursing infants, oxen, donkeys, sheep, with the edge of the sword. Now one of the sons of Elimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the Lord's priest. So David said to Abiathar, he said, I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul. Now watch what David does. Look what he says. He says, I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not fear, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. But with me, what will happen? You shall be safe. What a contrast when you think about David and Saul. Saul is bloodthirsty, and even though David did not have a hand in the death of these priests, what does he do? He takes responsibility for it. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Right. Well, again, I think David was trying to justify what he did because he didn't want to see Elimelech and his family get involved in this. Not at all. Not at all. You know how it is. If you've already made a determination in your mind, I know this. I can say, well, I've prayed about it, and I may or may not have prayed about it. Okay, and I'm just using a hypothetical here. But if my mind is already made up, I'm going to make it happen. Okay, and again, I'm talking. This is my flesh talking, right? And y'all know, y'all been there. Y'all looking at me like, the pastor is telling us this. I'm just telling you that the Bible tells us this, that in the flesh dwells how many good things? No good thing. And I'm telling you, my flesh is as nasty as yours is. And your flesh is as nasty as mine is. I'm telling you. When you make up, you determine in your heart that you're going to do something, guess what? You're going to mow everything down that stands in your way. That's human nature. That's the way that we are. Right or wrong, that's just the way we are. Now, y'all looking at me like, that's not me. I would never do that. Yeah, I'm talking about you because I'm talking about me because I know what my flesh and what my nature is like, right? You make up your mind you're going to do something. Now, again, I don't know. We're not ever going to go. Hopefully, we'll never go to the extremes that Saul does here. But we're the same way when we take a deeper look. So here's what I want to do. I want you to kind of lock in on verses 6 through 10. And I want you to think with me, because here's the heading I'm going to give this. Saul is paranoid. And so I'm going to call this paranoia and self-pity. Paranoia and self-pity. I think if you can see, he's having his own pity party, and the invitations have gone out, and really only one person shows up. Well, two. Saul being himself, but I think Doeg comes. He would be the other guy that shows up to Saul's pity party. And he's not an Israelite. That's correct. He's an Edomite, right? Say it again. Yeah, because they're already there, right? He had already determined in his heart that he's, again, I'll talk about this more in depth in a moment. Doeg doesn't care about Saul. He's ladder climbing. That's exactly right. He's what's in it for me? That's all he cares about. He don't care about Saul. He don't care about Elimelech. He don't care about David. He don't care about anybody but himself. And we'll talk about that more in depth in a moment.
He's not a Jew, is he?
No, he's not. Right, he's an Edomite. Right? So let's look at this. So the very first thing I want you to see in verses 6, 7, and 8, let me just reread it and see if you pick this up. And that is that Saul throws himself a pity party. Question. Have any of you ever thrown yourself a pity party? I see some hands going up and I see some noggins going. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Let's look at it. Can you see if you can pick up on the pity party here? He says, and when Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered, okay, now he knows where David is. Now Saul was staying at Gibeah under a tamarisk tree in Ramah with his spear in his hand and all of his servants standing about him. And notice what he does. He's looking at it. He's sitting down. You get this visual aid in your mind. He's sitting down. All of his posse, all of his men are standing in front of him. And he basically begins to cry out to them and said, hear now, you Benjamites. Will the son of Jesse, now think about this. He has such hatred for David that he can no longer call him by name. He's calling him the son of Jesse. He says, will the son of Jesse, hey guys, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you all the captains of thousands and the captains of hundreds? In other words, will he be as good to you as I've been to you? Okay, he's feeling sorry for himself because he's thinking, again, he fully believes that they're in on the conspiracy. Verse 8, he says, all of you have conspired, and again, he didn't just say some of you. He said, all of you have conspired against me, and there is no one. How is it that not a single one of you have told me that my son has made a covenant, again, not with David, but the son of Jesse, that none of you have a heart for me because you have basically aligned with him? Obviously, I'm convinced that all of you knew that my son Jonathan had made a covenant with this son of Jesse to overthrow the throne. That's what he's accusing these men of. Okay? So he has this incredible pity party. Now, most of us who are willing to admit that we've had a pity party, we know what it looks like from the inside. It's not very pretty, is he? But now we get to see what it looks like from the outside, so to speak. Saul has been searching for David. We know that to be true, right? He wants him dead. He finally learns where David is, right? And he begins with his own men. He begins to scold them. He begins to make accusations toward them that they have been withholding information from him. He's sitting under this tree. He's got a spear in his hand, and again, those guys had to have known what he's capable of with the spear, that he'll throw it at a moment's notice, right? But now he's accusing them of being in on the conspiracy of Jonathan and David seeking to overthrow the throne. And I'm going to ask you this: why is Saul having this pity party? Why is he feeling sorry for himself? Why is he angry at his own men? Yeah.
Also, Nathan, his own son.
Jonathan.
Nathan, that's my son. Jonathan is on David's side. I mean, that's got to really make him feel.
I've been betrayed. Yeah. You know, he confronted Jonathan back with that a couple of chapters ago, if y'all remember that. You know, what have you done? You know, do you not realize that, hey, if he's going to be the next king, what that means to you, that means you're not going to be the next king, right? Let me sum it up in one word. He's paranoid. He's absolutely paranoid. I thought about this today. This was probably, I think, when Kyle and Kayla were in 7th and 8th grade, respectively. I would go and pick them up, but I would park across the street from the school at Wills Point Junior High School or middle school. And I noticed that sitting there, after sitting there, you know, like Monday through Friday, waiting to pick them up, I noticed that there were some drug houses. You know, because I would watch people come up, and they would come and go. I mean, just constantly in and out, right? And my windows were pretty dark tinted. And one day I pull up, and I'd already alerted the Wills Point Police Department. I'm thinking, man, y'all need to kind of drive by that neighborhood, because I really think that these two houses right next to each other are drug houses. He said, oh, yeah, we've been watching those. Well, one day I'm sitting there, okay, and I'm reading a book or something, and a guy comes up and he knocks on my window. And I roll down my window, and he goes, hey, now keep in mind, I'm across the street from this house, okay? I'm not right in front of the house. I'm across the street in front of this house. He goes, he knocks on my window, I roll down my window, and he goes, hey, who are you? I said, who's asking? Why do you want to know? He goes, we've been watching you. We've been watching you. In fact, I've run your license plate, and I can't figure out who you are. Who are you? Why are you here? Now, why is he reacting that way? Why is he reacting that way? The answer is he was paranoid. And I kid you not, the next week, both of those houses had been emptied. They'd already moved out. They thought I was law enforcement. Okay? They did. I wasn't scared of these guys. I'm not sure what kind of drugs they were running, but I just thought it was very funny that he had gotten so upset about. Again, I'm not blocking his driveway. I'm not even directly in front of his house. I'm on the opposite side of his house in the street. And by the way, we don't own the street.
And you're by a school.
And I'm right by a school. I mean, literally less than 50 yards from the school, right? It's paranoia. And that's exactly what's going on here with Saul, okay? Now, again, keep in mind, I had you make a mark or underscore a circle of the tribe of Benjamin, and David being the tribe of Judah. And he warns his men, look, David is not going to treat you. If David becomes king, he certainly will not be treating you any better than I am. Let me tell you something. Saul is being a terrible leader here. A guy who is currently the king, he's ranting, he's raving, he's pitiful, and he is pathetic. I want you to write this down somewhere. This is probably not going to be popular. This won't be the most popular thing I say tonight, but I want you to write it down. Self-pity has no place in the life of a believer. Did you get that? Self-pity has no place in the life of a believer. You know why? Why would I make a statement like that? Because it is a repudiation of the blessings of God in your life. And I would also say to you tonight, it's a very dangerous place to be. Does anybody know what Philippians, we don't have time to turn there, you might write this verse down. Philippians 4:4, does anybody know what Philippians 4:4 says? If I start it out, you'll know it. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again, I say rejoice. So what are we to do? Rather than having self-pity, what are we to do? We are to rejoice again. Where? In who? In the Lord. Let me tell you something. If you would spend as much time looking this way as we do this way, I guarantee you it'll completely change your outlook on life. Huh? Absolutely. Absolutely. God, I recognize that I am a mortal man. I'm a human. That I fail in so many ways. God, there's never a time that you fail. And God, my dependence must be on you. God, I must depend on you to provide for my needs. I depend for you to provide for everything that I am and have in life. But when we have self-pity, think about that. We're basically saying, God, you are not dependable. You say, well, I would never say that. You may not say it, but you carry that out. And again, I do the same thing too. I'm preaching tonight as much this way as I am preaching that way. Number 2. Not only does he throw himself a pity party, but then look at verse 9 and 10. Oh, brother, this knucklehead. Verse 10 says, then answered Doeg the Edomite, who was set, over the servants of Saul, and said, I saw the son of Jesse. Now think about that. He's not even capable of saying David. I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob, to Elimelech, the son of Ahitub. And he inquired of the Lord for him and gave him provisions and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistines. Saul acts as the informer. Doeg acts as the informer. Now, you'll remember we first met him back in chapter 21, the very beginning of chapter 21. He's kind of eavesdropping on the conversation that David is having with the high priest known as Elimelech. And by the way, he is a shady, shady character. And you know this because you've already read the end of this chapter. Now again, Doeg has no interest, in my opinion, it's just me speaking, I don't think he cares the least little bit about Saul. He certainly does not care about David. He certainly does not care about Elimelech. And I think Vicky is absolutely right. All he cares about is climbing that ladder. And he don't care how he gets there. Right?
What nationality is it? Is that just Arab?
You can I think you could trace the Edomites all the way back to Esau. Yeah. Descendants of Esau. Yeah. Well, let me move on to the second major heading. We've talked about paranoia, okay, and self-pity. Now let's think about accusation and intimidation. Accusation and intimidation, that's what you have in verses 11 through 15, because what has Doeg just told Saul? Hey, I'll tell you where he was. He came to the priest at Nob. And the priest, guess what? The priest prayed over him. He sought the Lord for him. And not only that, he gave him food and he gave him a weapon. And so what do you think Saul, you put 2 and 2 together, what do you think Saul's going to come to the conclusion? That Elimelech is in on it too. He's already convinced that there is a conspiracy going on to overthrow the throne. And now he's convinced, the word of Doeg, that this man of God is in on it too. Now watch what happens, beginning of verse 11. So the king sent to call Elimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king. So he doesn't just summon the priest, he summons his entire family. And here's what Saul said. Think about this. You talk about disrespect. He doesn't even call Elimelech by his name. He just refers to him. He says, "Hear now, son of Ahitub." And I love what Elimelech does in verse 12. He shows respect. He's everything that Saul isn't. He says, "Here I am, my Lord." Verse 13, notice what he does. He accuses Elimelech of conspiracy. Verse 13 through 11 through verse 13. He says, "Then Saul said to him, 'Why have you conspired?'" You see it? "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as it is this day?" What does he mean by inquiring of the Lord? That you have prayed and asked God to help you and to help him be a deterrent or a threat to me. So he accuses Elimelech of conspiracy. Very much so. Yeah, David's not out to get him. Jonathan is not out to help David overthrow the throne. He's trying to protect his buddy's life, right? He accuses Elimelech of conspiring against him. He accuses the priest of helping David and inciting David to rebellion, so that David is now waiting to ambush him. which again is not anywhere close to the truth. But that's what Saul thinks. And again, is this not true that when you and I get a burr in our saddle, unless God intercedes and interjects, we oftentimes, you know what, it doesn't matter what anybody says to us. Our mind is made up. By the way, did Elimelech do anything wrong?
Obviously, he didn't know the trouble between.
He asked, but David did not tell him the truth, right? In fact, truth be told, he was completely unaware or oblivious to the war that was going on between Saul and David. I say Saul and David, really Saul toward David, right? Remember, David lied to Elimelech in order to, I think, to protect Elimelech. Certainly didn't want him to get involved, right? But again, Saul is so paranoid that he accuses a man of God of conspiracy. And by the way, this is a very serious accusation. A serious accusation, especially coming from a king. And even though it's an accusation, it is absolutely not true. You know why? Because Saul doesn't have all the facts. Saul didn't have all the facts. So what does Elimelech do? I'll tell you what he does. He does two things. He speaks boldly. He boldly speaks on behalf of David and himself. Notice what he does in verse 14 and 15. I don't know if I gave you room, or you might turn on the back of your page, because I want you to notice just in verse 14 alone, the 5 things that he points out to Saul about David. He gives 5 things to Saul about David, and they're really short. I hope you'll write these down if I didn't give you room in your paper. Number 1, notice what he does, verse 14. He says, so Elimelech answered the king and said, who among all your servants is as faithful? So he calls David a servant of the king. That's number 1. He calls David a servant of the king. And notice what he says about being a servant of the king. Who among all your servants is as faithful as David? In other words, not only is he a servant of the king, but number 2, he's loyal to the king. David's a servant of the king. David is loyal to the king. I'll let you figure out what number 3 is. Do you see it there in the middle of verse 14? He's a son-in-law. Hey, Saul, David is one of your servants. Saul, David has been loyal to you. Number 3, if the first 2 don't count, he's a family member. Now, I don't have a son-in-law. Some of you do. I would hope that you love your son-in-law. Number 4, so David's your servant. David is loyal to you. David is your son-in-law. He's a family member, for crying out loud. Number 4, look what he says. Who goes at your bidding. What he means by that is he's one of your own bodyguards. David is one of your own bodyguards. And then last but not least, he says, and is honorable in your house. I bet this was really set with Saul. And what he means by that is he's respected by your own family. David is respected by your own family. That is, except you. So Elimelech not only speaks for David, but he also speaks for himself. Notice what he does there in verse 15. He says, and now this is he's putting his own life on the line. Yeah, he's speaking up for David. Verse 15, he says, did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Okay. Basically, he says, I do this for all, right? I didn't just do this for him. He said, far be it from me. Let not the king, I love this, let not the king impute anything to his servant or to any in the house of my father. Why? For thy servant knew how much? Nothing. Not even a little, and certainly not much. Absolutely. But he had to. He had to. He spoke truthfully to the king. Again, it's not always what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear. Totally agree with Sam. If you heard what Sam said, it didn't really matter what he said. I think Elimelech already knew that his head was on the chopping block. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let me move on to the third and final thing. This is really what I want to hurry up and get to anyway. We talked about paranoia and self-pity. We've talked about accusation, intimidation. That's exactly what he's doing. He's trying to bully the priest here. But then let's look at who the ultimate person he's trying to get at, and that's God, and that's striking at God. Three specific things take place in these verses. Verse 16 and 17, we see that Saul gives the order, but what do the guards do? They refused. Saul orders, and the guards refuse. Okay, that's what I want you to write in that first one. Look at verse 16 and 17. Can't you just see smoke coming out the ears of Saul? He was already angry. You helped that kid. You helped that guy. You gave him food. You gave him a weapon. You prayed over him. And as Bud accurately said, he's defending David. He's defending himself, trying to shoot straight with the king. And as Sam said, no matter what he says, it's just making the situation worse. And so look what he does. Verse 16. And the king said, read it with me, you shall surely die, Elimelech, but not just you, but you and all your father's house. Now think about this. On the heels of Elimelech giving his defense, now it's Saul's turn to respond. And instead of listening to the man of God, Saul moves to outright striking at God. Now remember the progression that we've seen in these verses so far. You've got the inward self-pity, the outward intimidation, and now you have the upward trajectory of striking at God. God, I can't be king anymore. We'll see about that. Let me write this down somewhere. Anytime you go to war against God, let me say this again. Some of you have already said it. Anytime you go to war against God, you are going to lose. Now, I find it interesting. Isn't this interesting? That Saul gives the orders. Notice what it says the guards did. Verse 17, and the king said to the guards who stood about him, turn and kill the priest. Now this is interesting. Say it with me. The priest, say it with me. Of the Lord. Can we all say that? Of the Lord. Think about this. Saul is keenly aware of what he's doing. So who is he really getting after? Kill the priest of the Lord. Now watch this. Because their hand also is with David, because they knew when he fled and did not tell it to me. But watch this. Latter part of verse 17. But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to strike the priest of the Lord. You know what that tells me? Saul's own guards feared God more than Saul himself did. Now think about this. They are putting their own lives on the risk because they have refused the order of the king. You don't get any higher than that, right? As far as from a human's perspective. They refuse to carry that out. You know what I think about when I think about this? I'm reminded of, is it Acts chapter 5? I think it's Acts chapter 5. When Peter and the other apostles are told by the council, do not preach in Jesus' name again. Remember what Peter said? What is right? To obey man or to obey God? That's what I think about when I think about this particular verse. So Saul gives the order, the guards refuse, and then Doeg slaughters the priest and town. Verse 18 and 19. And king said to Doeg, you turn and kill the priest. Now, Doeg didn't even think twice about it. Again, he thinks he's going to ascend to the top. So Doeg the Edomite turned, struck the priest, and killed on that day 85 men who wore the linen ephod. All of them. And not only that, look at verse 19. To me, this is, when I look at verse 18 and 19, I'm thinking, my soul, think about this. And also at Nob, not only has he killed the priests in that city, but also at Nob, the city of the priest, he struck with the edge of the sword both men and women, children and nursing infants, oxen, donkeys, and sheep with the edge of the sword.
You think Doeg had a troop of guys with
He had to have. He had to have. The only way that he could have done it otherwise is if they were not some type of having some restraints on them. He had to have had a posse with him, if you will. Now, here's what I find. Y'all see the analogy here? Y'all remember what took place in 1 Samuel chapter 15? When God gave the order to Saul to wipe out all of the Amalekites? Men, women, children, all the animals. Wipe them out. Remember what happened? He didn't do it all. But look at the irony here. He didn't do the enemy of God, but now he's wiped out the people of God. Is that not irony?
How did Doeg ever get to that position that he would even be part of that entourage?
There's always a mercenary. Money, you ever heard money talks? Again, it's his goal, what's in it for me? Again, I firmly believe he does not care about Saul. This is not about protecting the throne. He's got no interest in that. This is all about, hey, how will this benefit me? Again, he didn't think twice about it. So Doeg slaughters the priests in town. Now, very quickly, look at verse 20 through 23. We see that David accepts responsibility. Miraculously, or by, I believe, the provision of God, the providence of God, one of the sons of Ahimelech escapes. And he makes his way to David. Verse 20, the Bible says, and now one of the sons of Elimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the Lord's priest. And look at David's response. And David said to Abiathar, he says, I know that when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Now, you still have your Bible open? Yes. I want you to do me a huge favor. I want you to look with me, if you will. Go back to 1 Samuel chapter 2. I want to show you something I find very interesting. Y'all remember this prophecy? 1 Samuel chapter 2. Lock in on verse 31. Look at verse 30, actually, verse 30. This is after Eli's sons had desecrated the house of God. Verse 30, 1 Samuel 2, verse 30 says, therefore the Lord God of Israel says, I said indeed that your house and the house of your father would walk before me forever. But now the Lord says, far be it from me that those who honor me I will honor, and those who despise me shall be what? Lightly esteemed. Look at verse 31. Behold, the days are coming, and I will cut off your arm and the arm of what? So that there will, watch this, not be an old man in your house. And you will see an enemy in my dwelling place, despite all the good which God does for Israel. And there shall not be an old man in your house forever. Do you see the fulfillment of that prophecy here in 1 Samuel 22? With all of these priests being wiped out? Do you see that? David, by the way, what a contrast here. One of the verse, and I'm gonna turn you loose tonight. Psalm 52. Psalm 52. David writes a psalm about this very incident. Psalm 52. I just want you to look at 4 verses. Psalm 52, look at verse 1, and then look at verses 5, 6, and 7. Psalm 52. Again, if you look at the kind of the heading there, it says, to the chief musician, a contemplation of David when Doeg the Edomite went and told Saul and said to him, David has gone to the house of Elimelech. Verse 1 says, why do you boast in evil, O mighty man? The goodness of God endures continually. Fast forward to verse 5. God shall likewise destroy you forever. He shall take you away and pluck you out of your dwelling place and uproot you from the land of the living. See that word Selah? I know that I have, and I know that other pastors have told you, that word means to stop and think about it. Pause, that word Selah. You see it a lot through the Psalms. Verse 6, he says, the righteous should also see and fear and shall laugh at him, saying, here is the man who did not make God his strength, but trusted what? In the abundance of his riches, and strengthened himself by what means? In his wickedness. And by the way, for you Bible trivia buffs, where's the last time in all the Bible that the name Doeg appears? Right here. That's it. That's it. That's it. You know what Doeg did? He created for himself a premature grave. You think God took that serious? Indeed he does. No, absolutely not. Yeah. Questions or comments? I don't have an ex-son-in-law, but I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I think we ought to pray for everybody, right? Both friends and those that we consider enemies, right?
And we talked about him killing all these people. I was witness to a gentleman here several years ago. He brought that up and said, why should I believe in God? He kills people.
Here's what I would say. Do we see innocent people being abused and murdered today? Look no further than unborn babies, right? We see persecution happening all around the world, and it's a matter of time before it becomes massive scale here in the United States. But when you look at the Old Testament, I've heard that same argument, Leroy, about, that you look at the God of the Old Testament, boy, he killed all of these people. I would say to this, that God gave those same people the same chance that he gives the people in our world today. But they rejected it. There you go. There you go, Greg. Sure.
So God's always taken a dim view of murder. He doesn't like it.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I thought I saw a hand go up here. Sam, were you going to say something?
I was going to say over in 21, it says, Dog the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. So that was his.
That was the connection.
He's the chief of
Saul's shepherds. Maybe he was a part of a farmhand. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, he's just a bad, evil dude, right? But a lot of times we think, you know what? You think about the book of Habakkuk, he cries out to God, God, how long are you going to allow this to go on? And I'm sure that you and I have prayed that too. Lord, you see all the evil that's happening in our world. Lord, how long are you going to put up with this? You get over to the book of Revelation, God says, now. One of these days, God's going to bring about retribution upon all of those who have brought evil into this world. No, we won't. And as the great preacher, drawing a blank, used to be at Bellevue, not Adrian Rogers, the one before him, the sermon called Payday Someday. God, what's his name? One of the things he said, one of the things he mentions is that God's payday doesn't always come on Friday.
Oh, yeah.
And that's true. Absolutely true. So those of you that are watching, I don't know if you already cut them off. Hey, thank you for joining us tonight. God bless you. Have a great rest of the week. And tell somebody about Jesus.